Small tank Panzer I is a light tank or small tank developed by Nazi Germany in the 1930s, designated as SD-KFC 101. The design of the Panzer I began in 1932 and mass production started in 1934. It was originally used as a training vehicle for the German army in building a new generation of armored combat and technology, but later it was deployed in the Spanish Civil War, World War II in Poland, France, the Soviet Union, North Africa, and China during the Second Sino-Japanese War. The tank Panzer I accumulated operational experience in Spain, helping the German army to defeat Poland and France in 1939 and 1940, respectively. By 1941, the chassis of the Panzer I was used to produce assault guns and tank destroyers. Other countries upgraded and modified the Panzer I to extend its service life, and it remained in service in the Spanish Army until 1954. The combat performance of the Panzer I was limited by its weak armor and the feeble firepower of only two MG-13 general-purpose machine guns. Designed as a training vehicle, the Panzer I could not compete with other countries' light tanks of the same era, such as the Soviet T-26. Although it appeared vulnerable in combat, from September 1939 to December 1941, the Panzer I still made up a significant proportion of the German army's tanks and was used in major battles during that period. While the small and fragile Panzer I may not match the importance of other famous German tanks, such as the Panzer IV, Tiger, and Panther tanks, it held a considerable position in Nazi Germany's series of blitzkrieg offensives and victories in the early stages of World War II. The Treaty of Versailles signed in 1919 prohibited Germany from designing, producing, and using tanks. The treaty also stipulated that anyone producing armored combat vehicles, tanks, and similar machines that can be used for military purposes would face a fine of 100,000 marks and a maximum imprisonment of 6 months. Despite the limitations imposed on the manpower and technology of the German military by the Treaty of Versailles, several army officers established a secret general staff office to study future strategies. Although the proposal for tanks as a new type of weapon received a lukewarm response from superiors, German companies were encouraged to research tank designs, while the military secretly collaborated with the Soviet Union and Sweden. They obtained valuable technical materials during their research, which later proved to be a significant contribution to German tank design. In 1926, German companies Rheinmetall and Daimler-Benz manufactured a tank prototype with a 75mm main gun at the Kamyshinsky Tank School in the Soviet Union, known as the Großtraktor, Big Tractor. In 1928, they produced a newer prototype with a 37mm main gun, called the Leichtraktor, Light Tractor. While the Großtraktor began service with the 1st Armored Division, the Leichtraktor was still undergoing tests. In the late 1920s to early 1930s, there were two leaders in German tank theory, General Oswald Lutz and his Chief of Staff, Colonel Heinz Guderian. Guderian's theories later became more influential and widespread. Guderian ultimately envisioned armored group armies consisting of 3 types of tanks. The first type included slower infantry tanks, with smaller caliber guns and few machine guns. Guderian stated that infantry tanks should have thick armor to defend against enemy anti-tank guns and artillery. The second type was a tank used for rapid breakthroughs, which needed to have sufficiently thick armor to defend against enemy anti-tank guns, and would be equipped with a 75mm main gun. The third type was a heavy tank, which would have a 150mm main gun and thicker armor to breach enemy fortifications. This tank would weigh between 70 and 100 tons, however, the industrial technology of the time could not allow for such armament to be mass-produced. After Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany, he approved the formation of armored divisions. Guderian simplified his proposal, suggesting the design of an armored combat vehicle, which evolved into the Panzer III, and a tank for breakthroughs, the Panzer IV. At that time, the military did not have experience operating tanks, so the German military custom-made a transitional tank for training personnel. This tank later evolved into the Panzer I. The design history of the PZ, KPFW, I can be traced back to 1932, when an armored combat vehicle called the agricultural tractor, German, Landwirtschaftlicher Schlepper, LAS, was introduced. The LAS was originally not intended for training German armored troops but rather to prepare the German industry for the mass production of tanks. In July 1932, Krupp presented a tank prototype named Landswerkgruppe, German, Landswerkgruppe, LKA, which featured a large turret and two 7.92mm MG-13 general-purpose machine guns. At that time, even the thinnest armor was impervious to machine guns, which limited the use of the PZ, KPFW. To training purposes, Henschel, Mann, Krupp, Daimler, and Rheinmetall collaborated to manufacture the LKA for mass production, replacing the fixed turret with a rotating turret. After this design was accepted, the LKA entered service in 1934. Before production, these tanks were referred to as LAS and LKA. In 1938, the German government named them Type A, German, Ausführung A. The first 15 tanks produced between February and March 1934 did not have a rotating turret, so they were used for training. After this batch of tanks was produced, the mass production of the Type A for wartime use officially began. The armor of the Type A was thin, with a maximum thickness of only 13 mm. The Type A also had some design flaws, such as balance issues and overheating of the ignition system. During operation, the driver sat inside the vehicle and controlled the tank using traditional steering levers, while the commander was in the turret and also operated the tank's machine gun. Two crew members could communicate through a voice pipe. The machine gun ammunition was stored in 5 magazines, each containing 25 rounds.